So, first thing I want to talk about today is DEI, which I'm sure if you've been keeping track of politics recently, you've probably noticed that the conservatives won't shut the hell up about DEI. Well, what the hell is it anyway? DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion, is what it stands for. To get a definition, I just went to Wikipedia. Let's go ahead and read what Wikipedia says DEI is. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, usually abbreviated DEI, are organizational frameworks which seek to promote the fair treatment and full participation of all people, particularly groups who have historically been underrepresented or subject to discrimination on the basis of identity or disability. So, long story short, DEI is essentially the corporate rebranding of affirmative action. That is pretty much why the conservatives hate it. That is to say, the targeted recruiting of women and minorities, essentially, is what DEI is. Although other efforts such as diversity training and anti-discrimination policies kind of fall under this as well. So, why exactly do conservatives hate DEI? Because they hate everything that helps minorities and women, and anything that basically aims to kind of even the playing field with cis white males, right? And DEI does that the same way that affirmative action did, and they can't fucking stand it, right? Because it actually helps people who are disadvantaged. It helps people who are not white. And that's the main problem. Basically, it is essentially the same kind of thing that affirmative action was. And they have the same types of arguments against it that they had with affirmative action. Now, keep in mind, right? Your average conservative person out there, your average conservative voter, has no idea what DEI actually is. They don't care. They don't really care to research the details. All they really want is just a vague threat out there in order to focus their hatred on. And that is what DEI has become. And the only reason why it's become that is because all of the conservatives in the media and all of the politicians have been repeating it over and over and over, and it's become something that they fear. And if you were to go to your average dude in the street, if you were to go to like your average Trump supporter at a rally or dude in the street or something like that, they'll say all kinds of bullshit about what DEI is not and not what it actually really does or what it really is. Because remember, they don't have a clue. None of these people actually have a clue at all. Kind of like when they were talking about CRT, the same kind of thing. You know, last couple of years, last 2 or 3 years, they would say all of this bullshit about CRT. The same kind of thing. And then you would actually go to a conservative person and you would say, well, what is CRT? What does it mean to you? And none of them would even be able to describe it or what it does or why it's bad or why we shouldn't teach it in schools or whatever like that. And it became very apparent that none of these people even had any idea what the fuck they were talking about. The same thing with DEI. They have no idea. And the same thing with affirmative action, to be honest. They had no idea about affirmative action either. They just hated it back in the day because their pundits told them to. And that's what's going on with DEI now. That's why DEI has become this huge boogeyman. And it's bullshit. I just want to kind of, as an aside, before we continue on, just as a quick aside, you ever notice how basically anything that helps anybody who's not white, the conservatives are against? They're against any kind of DEI, diversity training programs, things like that. Anti-discrimination programs, anti-discrimination laws. Conservatives, right now, it's a mainstream position now to want to overturn the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That's a mainstream thing that mainstream pundits, people like Charlie Kirk and shit like that, are saying without any fear because they've managed to push the country so far to the fucking right that they can get away with saying any kind of ridiculous fascist bullshit nowadays. They know that nobody's going to do a goddamn thing about it. So that's like a mainstream position now to undo the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Not a joke. Of course, they're always against things like drug rehab programs, welfare programs, any kind of program or law that gets rid of disparity when it comes to policing or the criminal justice system. Even when you can demonstrate that these things affect people like black people and people of color disproportionately, they don't give a shit. The reason why, of course, is they don't care is because it actually hurts minorities and people of color. They're totally fine with people going to prison as long as it's black people going to prison. Keep that in mind. And you know, what I just said there is kind of harsh, right? You may say, my family, they're conservative and they're not racist, right? But if you actually really think about it, how policing came to its final form in this country, it was all about race. That's really what happened. The establishment of modern police forces and prisons, it didn't really take shape until it became a way for the white majority in order to prison and disenfranchise black people. And that's the goddamn truth. You know, think about it, right? This is just as a quick aside, I mean, but it still sort of relates to DEI, but still. But as a quick aside, right, back in the day when black people were slaves or whatever, it didn't matter. Then suddenly, right after the Civil War, there were tons and tons of black politicians being elected to Congress. See, this is part of the history that they don't teach you in the history books. A large number of black politicians became elected, black senators, black House reps, things like that. And that led directly to Jim Crow. Once people in the South started realizing, hey, black people are gaining political power, we got to do something about this. Suddenly you started seeing all these Jim Crow laws pop up in order to stop people from voting. Right. And not only that, suddenly you started seeing the establishment of modern police forces. And then all of a sudden, black people started going to jail in disproportionate numbers than white people. Keep in mind, this was during the same era where there were lynchings every week, where it was institutional racism to a point where there was no justice, no sense of justice whatsoever. Black people could be lynched and murdered on the usual. The perpetrators of these crimes would just get away with it without any problem whatsoever. This is how it all shook out. And if you actually look, that type of institutional racism is still prevalent today. Not to the same extent, obviously, right? There have been improvements in the last 100 years, obviously. I'm not saying there haven't been, but it's still pretty fucking prevalent. Black people in the country live in all the poor areas. They make less money. They live in more polluted areas than white people. They're more likely to go to prison for longer sentences. Like if a white person commits the same kind of crime as a black person is more likely to go to prison and go to prison for longer. And that's just how it is now. And to say that there's equity or even something close to the same access to the justice system. Well, that was kind of a bad way to put that. Like, I guess a better way to put it would say that there's institutional racism still exists to a point where there is noticeable advantages to being white and disadvantages to being black. And that's really how it is. I guess that's a better way to put it in this country. That's due to ingrained institutional racism in our society. And to try to deny that, I mean, because that's the thing, is that a lot of people in this country are in denial over this kind of thing. But the truth bears it out. So this is what DEI is supposed to address, right? That's the whole point of DEI, is that it's supposed to address these disparities, right? You know, like when people talk about white privilege, like, because privilege makes it sound like, well, hey, you're born with special access just because of your birth. That's what privilege sounds like, right? And it's not exactly that. It's just more like there's disadvantages that black people have that white people just don't. And we see it in lots of different segments of our society. Everything from getting a job to the criminal justice system to education. You know, you're more likely to get a callback for a job if you have a white-sounding name. This is definitely true. If you're a black person, and you're less likely to get a callback for a job if you have a black-sounding name than versus a white-sounding name. That's just one example. You know, there's also things like disparities in sentencing. There's disparities when it comes to medical care. That's another thing. Like, Black people, for example, are less likely to be prescribed painkillers because there's a bias that black people in general are less susceptible to pain when there's like no medical basis for that whatsoever. This shit like that. I mean, this is things that are in problems with our society. We like to think that we've come a long way since the 1850s or whatever, and we have. But at the same time, these biases still exist out there. And these are just examples of it that we really need to address in our country. So that's what DEI is supposed to do. DEI is one way that a corporation, because that's most of the time when they talk about DEI, they're talking about corporations. Although it can be also implemented by, say, like governmental entities, things like government programs, and then also sort of like semi-private entities like colleges, that kind of thing. That's what DEI is supposed to address. It's supposed to basically diversify the workforce. That's the whole kind of point, right? Diversify the workforce in order to get some equity in your society, right? And I think personally it is beneficial to your society to basically spread around the wealth and not just have, say, for example, every single educated professional be of the same race and the same sex. It's like, no, it's not healthy to have all of the black people be poor in your society. You should try to do something to address that, right? It's wrong when your average black family has somewhere around, 16% of the wealth of your average white family. Right? Now, whatever you think the cause of that is, it doesn't really matter. If you think it's because of institutional racism, that's how I kind of think that's how that shook out. But there could be all kinds of different reasons for that. For generational poverty. There can be all kinds of reasons for that. Ultimately, it doesn't matter, in my opinion. I don't care really what the reasons are. It's more important to me, personally, like, well, what are you going to do about it? It's not healthy for your society to basically have that type of stratification where wealth is so like stratified in between race like that. And that's what it is. It's kind of been like that for generations at this point. Well, are we ever going to actually do something about it? Well, how do you get rid of generational poverty? Short of just straight up giving people money. Well, I don't know if you know this, folks, and I know a lot of my more left-leaning viewers might take issue with what I'm about to say, but just giving people money does not stop poverty. You would think it would, right? It doesn't. Just giving somebody money directly may help them in the short run, but it doesn't seem to get rid of generational poverty. There's actually systemic causes to generational poverty. It's not just, oh, these people are poor, give them $1,000. That doesn't help, right? In the long run, it doesn't help. It may help that one person right there, right away. And, there's something to be said about, say, things like UBI programs and stuff, right? I think those are great. I think we should try them out. And I think they could do a lot of good for people. But it's not so simple. You can't just give everyone money and then say, okay, poverty is eradicated. Doesn't exactly work like that. Poverty is a symptom of a greater sickness in your society. That stratification of have and have-nots, which, let's face it, every society on Earth has struggled with, right? Most of the societies on Earth haven't really given much of a shit about, to be honest. I mean, but still, this is definitely a problem that we have. And how do you, I guess, shape society in such a way that it reduces that divide? To some extent, every society on Earth has this problem, but some have been doing better than others. And how do we err on that good side? Because, I mean, to be honest, right, folks? Me, personally, it doesn't matter if there's rich people and poor people. I don't care. I don't care that there's billionaires out there. Like, some people on the left are sort of disgusted by the thought of billionaires, and they think being a billionaire is immoral and all this other shit. Yeah, maybe so. But me personally, I don't really give a shit. I don't care if there's super duper fucking rich people who have so much money that they blow it on like penis-shaped rockets and fly into space. What the part I have a problem with is that while they're off gallivanting, wasting all this fucking precious resources on their personal hobbies, there are other people who are living on the street eating garbage. That's the part I have a problem with, right? I'm perfectly fine letting billionaires be billionaires as long as the people who actually really need the money in this country are taken care of. And that's what we're not doing. We're not taking care of the people who actually need the money. If that means that we got to tax the billionaires, then tax them. If we can do it without taxing the billionaires, I'm totally cool with that too. I don't care. I just want some solution. I don't see any solutions. Anyway, so that is what DEI is supposed to do. DEI is supposed to address some of these disparities in our stratified society, which just seem to be stratified along the lines of race. Even more than class or anything else, right? It really seems like it. I mean, of course, there are rich black people, there are rich Latinos and rich Asians, and there are poor white people. I mean, not every single white person is rich and not every single black person is poor, but it sure does seem sometimes that a lot of the wealth in our society is stratified along those racial lines first, and then class lines second. Kind of seems like that to me. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but sure does seem like there are far more poor minorities than rich minorities. So how do we address this? Well, DEI is one of the solutions. The idea being that, very similar to affirmative action, you go out and try to recruit people from marginalized communities. Mostly, you know, for example, minorities and also women as well. Especially when it comes to fields that they're not very well represented in. Things like, say, STEM fields, for example, right? Vast majority of STEM fields in this country are still occupied by white males, right? White cis males still occupy the vast, although that's kind of changing a lot. There are a hell of a lot of female doctors, and especially in the medical field, there's a lot of women who are starting, lots of women doctors out there, more so than anything else, more so than programmers or scientists or engineers. They kind of have that field, like, that's a little more diversified than the others, but still, they could use some more women and minorities there as doctors as well. And this, of course, has led to the exact same kinds of criticisms from the right wing in this country that we saw essentially when it came to affirmative action. And they're essentially the criticism against DEI, they're identical to the criticisms for affirmative action that we used to see. One of those being, and probably the most prevalent that you'll see, criticism being that, well, it leads to people being hired who are not qualified for the position. And how many times have you heard about that when it came to affirmative action? Affirmative action mostly had to deal with college students and college admissions and stuff. And what was the one criticism you got the most when it came to affirmative action is, well, they're allowing in students who aren't qualified, right? Do you remember back when in 2014, 2015, when we were getting ready for the 2016 election and Donald Trump first sort of was making a name for himself? How did Donald Trump, right? How did he make a name for himself politically? He did it by attacking Barack Obama, because Barack Obama was the president at that time, of course. Basically, this is how Trump threw his first forays into politics, into getting his name out there, back in 2013, 2014. How did he attack Barack Obama? Did he attack his policies? Did he attack anything that he did as president or something like that? No. What did he attack? He basically did the birth certificate thing. Very racist, kind of implying that because of Barack Obama's skin color, he couldn't be a real American, that he must have come from Kenya, right? Now, that attack started with the Hillary Clinton campaign, believe it or not. That's how it kind of started. But Trump took that and ran with it, right? And I remember very, very, very clearly one of the personal attacks that Trump levied at Obama was that he wanted to see Obama's college records. He wanted to see his grades in college. And if you remember, like, Barack Obama was a fucking, I believe he was like a professor, or he might have been like an honorary professor or something like that. But he wasn't crawling in at the bottom of the class. No, he was like magna cum laude and shit. Oh, he's a smart cookie, Barack Obama, right? And that was the one way besides the birth certificate, the birtherism. The other way that he attacked him was by implying that Barack Obama was a recipient of affirmative action. He wanted to see his records. He was like, and he challenged Barack Obama to release his college records. Why would he do that? Why would it matter what Barack Obama's grades were in college? I mean, what? He hasn't been in college for fucking like 25, 30 years. Why would it fucking matter? Because they implied that he wasn't good enough to get into college, that he was the affirmative action president. How many times did you guys hear that back in 2015, 2016? Obama's the affirmative action president. I heard it all the fucking time from fucking the wacky conservative circles I used to troll in back then. Even back then, it was sort of like my hobby to troll conservatives. Right. But I heard that more than once. There were memes about that. Barack Obama, the conservative memes saying that he was the affirmative action president, right? And that's one of the criticisms, the idea that, well, affirmative action is letting people in who are not qualified, which is bullshit, because that's not what affirmative action does. That's not what it's ever done. The whole point is that you're supposed to recruit people from certain demographics, but that doesn't mean you lower the standards. And this is where conservatives get it wrong, because they take that to mean that the standards have been lowered in order to allow these people to get jobs that they don't deserve, which is complete and total fucking bullshit. Do you guys remember 2 weeks ago, a more recent example of this? 2 weeks ago, there's a 737 flying around and a fucking door falls off of the airplane. You remember that shit? I even did a video on it about a week and a half ago, right? Door falls off of the airplane. And immediately we saw from the right wing, since nothing can happen in this country without it turning it into a conspiracy, immediately we saw all of these memes and shit. And the door must have fallen off of the goddamn plane because of D.E.I. Because there were black people and fucking women that are being hired by airline companies and shit now, and it must be their fault the door fell off the goddamn plane, right? And I wish I was joking, but I'm not, and I want to show you guys something. This is from a YouTube channel. These two guys are called the Patriot Twins, and I've never seen these fucking assholes before, but they're these two sort of like black football player looking dudes. Like, they look like they should be, like, linebackers for, like, the fucking LA fucking Raiders or something, right? Where are the Raiders at? Are the Raiders in LA or are they in Oakland now? I don't even know. I don't even know anything about fucking football. Let's listen to what the Patriot Twins have to say about D.E.I. and the door falling off the airplane.
Cut these losers off. Well, I have a problem. If I'm getting on a flight and you got a Negro in the cockpit, second pass, drinking lean, he got the job put the flight. You putting the safety of the public at risk.
The people on that plane and the people on the ground.
That is scary. Look, giving a man a job.
Yeah, let me say something.
Because he's a Negro. I have a problem with that.
Let me say.
Why? Remember, these two... Now, the only reason that these guys are saying this shit is because they're black. And they can get away with it because they're making all kinds of money being the token black guy. That's... conservatives love it when fucking... black people are like racist against other black people. They absolutely love it. It's like manna from heaven from them, because then they can go, see, even these guys understand, right? And what it is, and these guys of course do it for the money. That's why these guys are doing that. That's why these guys are saying this shit, because they get paid to fucking say it and they don't give a fuck. Right? And it's like, okay, well, whatever. I hope you all understand that no matter how much shit you talk, they're still gonna burn a cross on your lawn. I hope you understand that. You'll never actually truly be accepted by these people because they're racist. So, but whatever, if that's how you make your money, who am I to like object, right? I just want to kind of point out, like, what you just said there. Give him a job, I have a problem with that. It's like, why do you have a problem with it? Why is it a problem what the skin color is of the person who flies an airplane? I mean, you would think you wouldn't give a shit as long as they can fly the plane just fine. I don't understand that. And this comes, it's a misconception that comes from the incorrect conservative criticism of DEI that they're lowering standards to give people jobs, and that's not how it is. Let's listen to a few more seconds of this.
The Negro. I have a problem with that. Let me say this. Hey, Kim, get your leg off me. I want to say this. Okay, you want more people of color and women to be pilots. You act like being a pilot is like something you can learn overnight, and anybody can do it. What are you trying to say? Black people have capacity to be pilots? Sound pretty racist to me. No, it's not.
Well,
it's not.
That is exactly what these two guys are saying, though. Right? You notice that he even made fun of his own stance. Oh, what are you saying? Black people don't have the capacity to be pilots? Yes, that is exactly what you just said. You just fucking said that. And your brother is in the middle of just saying that. But see, this is how these guys make money, right? They're saying the quiet shit that the white people don't say out loud. That's what they're doing. A few more seconds of this. We're not going to watch this whole thing. Just a few more seconds.
Not simple.
Yeah, I don't think
It's not like learning to ride a bike. Yeah. I've seen one black pilot my entire life. Boy, man, I was scared that whole flight.
Now listen to what he just said there, right? He just said being a pilot is not simple. It's not like learning how to ride a bike. So why would you think if you saw a black pilot that he's not qualified? The only reason you would think that, according to what this guy just said, is that he thinks black people don't have the mental capacity to be pilots. Right? Now, does he really think that, or is he just saying it because it makes him money? Because that's what the white people who watch his show say. Somehow I suspect it's number 2 there. Somehow I suspect it's all an act. And it's really the second option. He knows that the fucking Nazis and shit that watch his stuff that's what they're gonna say. And so he's like, okay, well, if I say this, it's gonna make me money. That's what I think, because I really don't believe that anybody could be so clueless. Right? It's a game to these people. That's what I believe. But I don't know. I could be wrong. Maybe this dude's a true believer. Maybe this guy really thinks that black people are genetically predisposed to not be able to basically develop skills that take lots of intense concentration and study. I mean, I don't know why you would think that unless you're a fucking racist, flaming racist piece of garbage. I mean, so this is just proof out there to you guys, to folks out there, right? That you don't have to be white to support white supremacy. These two fucking morons are doing it right here, to the detriment of themselves. I don't think they understand that. I mean, are they basically just... The guy just basically got up and said, yeah, all black people are too stupid to learn how to be fucking pilots. Right? Black people are too dumb to learn how to fly planes. That's what the guy got up and said. Right there in front of everybody. Just disparaging... it's sort of like a dude punching himself in the nuts and then, like, hoping you'll like him. Like, you ever see that guy, like, in high school who was, like, kind of nerdy and knew it, and would just kind of like constantly put himself down in the hopes that it would make he thought that the popular kids would like him. Like, maybe they'll stop bullying me if I beat myself up. That's what these two guys are doing. Now, whether they know they're doing it or not I don't think it really matters at this point. That's just what's fucking happening. I think it's an act myself. I think this is an act. I think Candace Owens is an act. I think Dave Rubin is definitely a fucking app. Like, basically, anytime you get these sorts of people who are in the out group, I guess is the way to put it, who try to, like, mosey their way into the in group by saying, like, oh, I'm one of the good ones. You'll like me. Blah, 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 right? And what they don't get is that it's like, fucking no, they're not gonna like you. It doesn't matter how many, like, black jokes you make and how many times you put other black people down and all that other shit. You're still not part of the in-group, and you never fucking will be. And that's what these people don't understand. That's why Dave Rubin, for example, has a child through I think he had a child through a surrogate. All of his viewers turned against him, and all of his conservative, like, other pundits and shit, they all turned against him and started calling them degenerates and shit like that. It's because they'll never fucking accept you. The whole point of their existence is to hate people like you. And these two guys, I guess, I've come to terms with that. I know the money must be really good in order for them to kind of just, I don't know, lie to themselves like this, but who am I to say? But that's just an example right there, just like what these guys thought. You know, that example where they think that recruiting from from the marginalized class means that you must dumb it down in order for them to be able to get the job, right? Oh, they're dumbing it down so pilots can get jobs. Because obviously a black person can't be a pilot, right? Obviously they're just not fucking smart enough or whatever. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous, man. A couple of other criticisms from conservatives when it comes to this kind of thing, that it leads to racial quotas. That's another criticism against affirmative action that you also see when it comes to DEI, right? And what they say is that, well, this leads to companies and stuff using quotas in order to hire people. That necessarily pushes out qualified white people. So you can't even get a job if you're white anymore, which is total fucking 100% bullshit. But here's the thing about racial quotas, folks, right? Racial quotas have been illegal in this country. When it comes to college admissions, at least, they've been illegal since 1978. A college is not allowed to use a racial quota when it comes to admissions. Now, they are still allowed to consider your race when it comes to admissions, which they should, because they should make an effort to have a diversified student body. But they're not allowed to say, okay, there's 100 slots, and of these 100 slots, 20 of them have to be black people. They're not allowed to do it like that. The conservatives and Republicans, of course, don't understand that because they've been fed lies their whole lives. Now, it's a little more loose when it comes to a private corporation or a company. They're not really beholden to that standard in so much. What they're not allowed to do, though, when it comes to hiring, they're not allowed to just hire somebody based on their race. They're not allowed to be like, okay, well, you're a white person, you get the job, you're a black person, you don't. No, there has to be other circumstances. Now, they are allowed to recruit, though, from specific demographics. They are allowed to say, hey, we should hire some more black people, and then go out and like put flyers and stuff around a black neighborhood saying, hey, we're hiring, and that kind of thing. They are allowed to do that, right? They are allowed to actively try to recruit from minority groups, but they're not allowed to say, oh, black people automatically get a job here, and white people don't even try applying. That's what's illegal. Conservatives don't understand that. They think it has to be a quota, even though, like I said, quotas have been illegal for 40 years now at this point. Same bullshit criticism that was thrown against affirmative action is now one that you see with DEI, of course. One more, and this is actually something that kind of relates directly to DEI when it comes to corporations enacting it. And what they're talking about here is that it's sort of just corporate window dressing. That is to say, a corporation out there doesn't really give a shit about diversity, and they just sort of have these programs to make it look like they have diversity, and really it's all PR, that kind of thing. This is actually a criticism that Vivek Ramaswamy has taken up against DEI. That's sort of how Vivek Ramaswamy got involved in politics too, was that he was an anti-DEI crusader, right? Which is really funny, seeing how he's a minority and everything in this country. But I guess it doesn't matter if you're rich. You can be rich and be a minority and still be fucking racist and nobody gives a fuck. Here's the thing about that, though, right? To say that corporations use these kinds of things as PR is a no-brainer. I mean, I say no duh to that, of course. Of course corporations do that, because corporations use everything as PR, right? And yes, it's true that, like, let's take some huge giant mega conglomerate, McGraw-Hill, for example. There's one, right? McGraw-Hill doesn't actually give a fuck how many people they hire and what the race they are. They don't give a shit about that kind of thing. But it is true, yes, they do have an image to uphold, and they want to look good. So yes, it is definitely true that corporations, more often than not, will use this kind of thing in order to just kind of slap a band-aid. And it's great because what it means is that they don't have to actually change their behavior. They don't have to actually do anything that leads to any kind of structural change in their companies or in society. All they got to do is just go out and hire a couple of minorities, and then they can say, see, look how much we support diversity, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's true. But I got news for you, folks. Everything a corporation does is that. Every single thing a corporation does is especially large corporations, everything they do has to do with PR. And that's just been a thing for decades. Forever. But when it comes to any kind of forward-thinking program having to do with, diversity, having to do with equality, having to do with environmentalism, that's just how it is. That all corporations are like that. And anybody who thinks that a corporation, especially like a large corporation out there, like that any large corporation out there doesn't take their PR into effect when it comes to this kind of thing, is fooling themselves. But why does that matter? Ultimately, they can do whatever the fuck they want. They can spin whatever they want, however they want. It doesn't matter to the actual person who gets the job, does it? I mean, they may end up helping people inadvertently, I guess is the way to put it. It's like, okay, yeah, this corporation is just using D.E.I. as window dressing. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, they don't actually really give a shit if women and minorities get jobs, but in the meantime, women and minorities are getting jobs because of them. So it's ultimately a good thing, I think. I don't think it's a valid criticism when every single thing that a company does is geared towards making them look good. So no, it's like, obviously, Disney doesn't actually give a shit about the LGBTQ community, for example. That's fucking obvious. Obviously, they are only interested in marketing to the LGBTQ community, and that's why you're seeing, just using Disney as an example, right? Does it really change anything? Well, no, but at the same time, we're also seeing lots of representation in their TV shows and movies. And ultimately, is that a bad thing? I don't think it is. So it's kind of a non-argument as far as I'm concerned, right? So I don't know. Basically, it's just stupid Republican bullshit. Okay. Now, I wanted to, before we wrap this up, oh wow, we're already at an hour? God damn. Well, I guess that's DEI. I was going to talk about Vivek Ramaswamy, but maybe we'll save that for next time, because he did this town hall on Twitter. Maybe I'll do a DEI part 2, and we will review Vivek Ramaswamy's ridiculous horseshit town hall that he did some months back. Hello folks, if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, please consider buying something from my Etsy shop, supporting me on Patreon, liking and subscribing, and checking me out across my social media links listed below. Thank you all so much, and see you next time.